This is a light fantasy story daring to return to that most unappreciated of the fantasy tropes, the heroic accountant. Darkleshank's Bad Budget dives into serious questions of statecraft with a depth of understanding that you normally find in a raindrop on the Sahara. With that, I give you Darkleshank's Bad Budget. May the seven sisters of Queen Cilantro sing their praises. He'd finally done it. The numbers fought him to the end, the debts to the banks, the costs of the militia, the endless expenses that flowed through, the fund royalty, all conspiring against him, banding together and taking the revenues out behind a dingy warehouse and making fun of their tiny muscles before bludgeoning them into submission. For 2 years, he chased every coin, invented new revenues, trimmed back expenses almost half as fast as King Ott created them. Darkleshank had done it all to bring the crown into balance. The royal monopoly on sea snail shell sales, try that twice, had been his masterwork. No one wanted to admit they partook of the nasty little things, but he'd be a muscle-bound champion if every banker, merchant, and noble didn't grind them up and snuff them to remove wrinkles and promote vigorous boudoir health. Or at least that's what happened after he and Aunt started the rumor that this was the secret to the renowned prowess of the Ginkta clan. It's amazing how stories about an unknown group of shepherds on the other side of the continent can stir such interest. No need to investigate such unfortunate facts as the Ginkga's near celibacy because of their unfortunate scent and their complete lack of interest in snails, be they landbound or mighty mariners. When it came to money, facts were fortuitously fluid. Darkleshank sank back in his chair, rested his hands on his more than ample midriff, and sighed in contentment at his exploit. Revenue equaled 50,000 kutas. Depths equaled 50,000 kutas. Where there had been a gap of over 20,000 kutars when he started, the expenses had climbed in the face of Ock's many projects. Worse, he'd replaced a few of the crooked tax collectors, as most were too connected. Darkleshank had every reason to expect the balance to shift to the revenue side and stay there, as long as he had some of the money from Ock. That was, of course, when the king knocked on Darkleshank's door and entered the office. Ock closed the door behind him, popped himself into the seat across from the royal treasurer, the king's feet dangling a good 6 inches in the air, and gripped the table as he leaned forward. "Mate, I need 1,000 kutas faster than a rook can jump a jackrabbit." Darkleshank really must find out what a roo was one of these days. Best he could tell it was some sort of giant mouse, but why would a giant mouse jump over a jackrabbit? Not this day's problem. This day's problem was how to point Darkleshank away from their hard-earned financial solvency, preferably before the grip of the hands at the end of Ock's massive arm cracked his table. "What have you done now?" "No need to dwell on that. I just needs the money. It's my money, so fork it over," Ock said as he leaned forward, poised to hoist himself onto the table, where he would make short work of his erstwhile accountant. During the past 2 years, they'd worked together, helped the poor, encouraged smaller businesses, built out militia as a counterweight to raiders and the merchants' armies. During this time, Ock had never used physical intimidation on Darkleshank, though nothing could be easier. There was something seriously wrong here, and he could only help if his king would level with it. "Ock, I need to know what the money's for. If it's for a good cause, maybe we can get someone to help, like we did with cleansing the dock. Merchants that wouldn't give a penny in new taxes opened their purses for that one. What cause had his do-gooder king gotten them into this time? The king stepped around the table and reared up to the same height as the seated Darkleshank. Just give me my quid. Ock could crush him in an instant. Sweat dripped down Darkleshank's throat as he said, tell me what you need it for so I can put together a plan. We don't have money lying around. It's all at work. We've got nothing to spare. Ock shook his head and collapsed back into his chair. Then I'm trussed up like a crocket of cobblers. Silence hung in the air for a minute before he continued. It's me gambling. It came back to nab me again. I knew it shouldn't have. But the bones cried out to me, and I thought, why not? It's not like I aren't giving the hair off my back to the kingdom. He looked up at the treasurer with red eyes. I stayed away from the dice since I got here, but they called to me something powerful, and they turned on me like they always do. Win a little at the start, and here and there, lose big at every turn. The game boss cut me off at 1,000. Otherwise, I'd have tossed my way to the bottom of the sea. The king put his head in his hands and sobbed, vulnerable for the first time in Darkleshank's memory, ashamed by his own weakness. But maybe he was upset over nothing. Simple answer, we don't pay him, or don't pay him for a few months. You keep away from the dice, and I'll. Blonde hair tossed as the king's head shook. Bloody oath, don't you think I thought of that? The blighter threatened to let everyone know the king's word was as good as a rat's chastity vow if I didn't pay by tomorrow. Darkleshank was keeping them afloat, and all the king's projects rolled forward, but only by taking out loans, lots of loans. Word got around that the king didn't pay his debt. Things would get complicated. Interest rates would increase. Banks would stop lending. Worst of all, debts would be called in early. Maybe an established king in a solid dynasty could laugh this sort of thing off, but not Ock. Still, there was another way. What if we arrest him and throw him in jail? First, it ain't no him. It's Lady Cilantro. Second, that ain't who I am. Don't toss innocent people in the hole. What honest bloke would ever believe me if I did that? We've got to find some money. What can we sell? This was worse by the moment. Lady Cilantro was the lover of the largest banker in town. She and her merry little band of women sold services to the cream of Funt society, particularly the rich cream. No, she was untouchable unless... Any chance the dice were rigged? No, I've been rolling the bones since I was a babe. I'd recognize a crooked cube as quick as a dog sniffed out its own tail. What about magic? Ock stood, walked around the room before shaking his head. Maybe, but it don't matter. No way we prove it, and the charge will stick from Sonatar. And it's not like they could smear her good name. When you ran the bordello for the rich and powerful, your reputation was beyond question. So what to do? The options appeared before Darkleshank, and they were as numerous as the hairs on a shark. Is there some sort of emergency tax you could throw out? Ock, this man who had merely run hundreds of mounted bandits out on his own, was scared stupid, his head again sagging in shame. No tax we can impose that quickly would be anything less than robbery. As the king's mouth opened, Darkleshank took command. Let me run down the list of things that won't work. We can't seize property from the wealthy because they'll band the militia together and throw us out, or simply take their money and sail away. There's too little stuff to sell, which would make everyone suspicious of us anyway. We can't divert money from our orphanages, soup kitchens, or anything else because we paid those all a month ahead. Seeing Ock's jaw tightened, he added, "Besides, you never let the poor down, and I'm sure you will not sell them out now. 100 other terrible options come to mind, but I only see one way out." The king's head rose, a look of expectation dawning on his face, which fell away as Darkleshank said, "Negotiate." Slunatar lived in what could only be called a palace, a far more lavish one than the king's. Several dining rooms, all provisioned with portraits, fine purple and gold tablecloths with couches to match. In every room, lovely ladies entertained generally rotund clients, all in the finest of dress, with the women's clothing designed to hint at pleasures within. Throughout the dwelling, the scents of the finest perfume mixed with delectable dietary treats. Say what you like, the lady knew how to run a pleasure house. Had Ock spent the money on other wares? Doubtful. The barbarian was disturbingly honest, a trait the treasurer needed to break of him one day. Sunatar's office came as a shock after the lushness of the entertainment rooms. This was a room such as found in a banking house, with the only painting being that of a woman and man in respectable clothing, likely her parents, a large wooden desk at the rear, and a meeting table on Darkleshank's left. There was a samovar behind the table, and Slunatar turned to pour cups for her two visitors. It was just as well, because she took Darkleshank's breath away. Strawberry blonde hair framed an oval face with pursed lips and hazel eyes that drew him in. The lips seemed always ready for kissing. Her dress was simple, blue, proper, and irresistible as it followed her body, not so tightly as he wished, hinting at her figure rather than striking him with it. Over the years he had known many pretty women, but this one put them all to shame. Worse, he knew that inside that package was a mind sharp enough to have built this business, cunning enough to have wound its way past the bankers and lawyers who would take advantage of her and make her their slave, ruthless enough to have the king in her palm. Attraction and fear roiled through Darkleshank's mind. "Your Majesty," she said, in the renowned royal treasurer. Her gaze lingered on him a moment, and the air left his lungs. "Your presence honors me excessively. Surely you could have sent a messenger with the money rather than bothering yourself with such a trivial errand." As Slunatar spoke, she gave each of them a teacup. Darkleshank noticed the muted scent of roses as she passed by, their hands brushing for an instant, nudging his mind further from business. "I'm sure you're here to bargain. Let me make this simple. The money's all I want and all I will take. Surely 1,000 krutars is no issue. Or are the king's finances in even greater difficulties than the rumors have it?" Ox stammered, must be too embarrassed, and there was money on the table here. Darkleshank planted his gaze on Slunatar's eyebrows. "Yes, of course we have the money," Darkleshank said. Lady Slunatar laughed, extending a palm. "Do you now? Then hand it over and we can discuss more pleasant things." "It's not so simple. We have the money, but not at this moment. Perhaps a slight delay with a little interest." "I know many bankers, and I'm not interested in that business. Gambling and entertainment are my services, and my value in these is well known. Were I to offer loans, I would compete with my best clients. Is there nothing we can offer for a delay? No price we can pay?" "I will not compete with my clients. They know this and appreciate my loyalty, even if my faithfulness doesn't get the recognition it deserves. The royal treasurer closed his eyes to focus. There was a hint in there somewhere, but he was too dim to grasp it. Surely your tax collectors can come up with something. You know they all steal from you, at least here in the District of Mirrors. Why not squeeze them? Perhaps an employment fee? Darkleshank shook his head. That's not the direction we want to go with the tax collectors. We prefer replacing dishonest ones rather than giving them safer jobs. Again the musical laugh. Then you will replace many. You two are so busy. There is so much for you to do. Perhaps they just need better supervision. Could it be she wanted a job? But Slunatar wouldn't be interested in becoming a bureaucrat, even with such a potentially lucrative position as tax commissioner. She was after something here. Now he looked her in the eyes. I would be fascinated to hear how you would correct the situation. Her smile enveloped him. I am but a simple businesswoman. Yet in my business, I hear things. I hear that in some kingdoms, there are nobles who report to the king, governing parts of the country in return for special considerations. I think they call them dukes. Now her eyes locked on him, dragging him toward her smile. Or duchesses. Righto, Ox said. Smashing idea. But I don't know that we... He stopped when Darkleshank held up a hand to stop Ox's clumsy but polite dismissal over what might be their only path out. It strikes me, Darkleshank said, that there is merit to this idea. Of course, a duke or duchess would need to do more than keep a thumb on tax collectors. The royal building projects and soup kitchens moved on a pace, and I would expect any faithful noble serving Darkleshank would help assure strong royal connections with the wealthier members of society. She nodded. Possibly entertaining, fine balls both for the king and on their own. There would be much to do in such a position. Darkleshank was certain he had her on the hook. Or was it the other way around? It seems to me that the District of Mirrors and its surrounding neighborhoods would be a good start in a kingdom as urban as Funt. Just trying it on for size, but this 20 or so blocks with 4 tax collectors, a soup kitchen, a pantry, a recruiting office, and the office of the Better Banks and Merchants, Slunatar said. That would be a challenging duchy indeed. Of course, it would be important to find the right woman or man for that position. Time to push. I think such duties would keep the person too busy to worry about little things like 1,000 Kutar depths, and we would expect them to keep the king out of their gambling houses in the future. After a moment's thought, she replied, It would be a shame to lose the royal business, but I think that would be an acceptable arrangement. She reached into a drawer and pulled out a note for Ox death, complete with the royal seal at the bottom. Why don't we work out the details and send me the paperwork? If they meet with my satisfaction, we can discuss with an appropriate ceremony. Slunatar put the paper back inside her desk. For now, I'll just hold on to this. He'd hoped she'd just rip it up, but perhaps this was not so bad. What, you don't have a second paper in there with proposed agreement already? Give me a few hours and I'll be back with the ducal agreement. Duchess Slunatar. Her smile could have thawed a frozen chimpanzee. Wait a minute, Ox said. Did you just saddle me with stinking nobility? I'd rather ride a koala into a battle than deal with those bludgers. There's nothing worse. The worst ones are pure bloodsuckers. Darkleshank held up his hand, silencing the king he respected for the second time that afternoon. But the best ones are worth their weight in gold, and I'm confident our new Duchess will be all we could ask. I've made many dreams come true, she said. I'm confident you will find my services completely satisfactory. Darkleshank was sure of this too, and even surer he would keep a very close eye on their new Duchess. If you like this video, you might also appreciate Darkleshank the Magnificent, which is the one that gets the story off and started. Bless you. Bless you. May you find someone of true nobility to rule that part of your life where your heart